If anyone has any questions, yeah.
Just a quick one.
Oh, let's wait for
the last name of that author, designing
Hogan?
for performance. What?
Lara Hogan, Lara Hogan. And again, if you go to stevesouders.com, the slides are there.
Thank you for the talk. It's really good information. We're working on something specific to the hero image right now, and I was curious about displaying it as a background image or any base 64 embedding, if there were any optimizations along that line that would work.
Yeah, so, it's better if you use an IMG tag. So the way these look-ahead parsers work is the HTML parser starts going through the HTML in streaming fashion. So as the packets arrive, the browser will just go as far as it can with as much text as HTML has been downloaded. When it hits a blocking script, the HTML parser stops until that script is, or style sheet is done downloading and being applied to the page, or if it's inline, being parsed and applied to the page. But while the HTML parser stops, the look-ahead parser rips through the rest of the tags. And it's just looking, it's going really fast because it's just looking for IMG, iframe, script, link, maybe object. And as it finds those, it's going to kick off those downloads as quick as it can. So if you use an IMG tag, the preloader is going to see it and kick it off quickly. If instead you use it as a background image, even if that CSS rule is in the page, the browser is not going to start downloading that background image until it creates the DOM element that rule applies to, and it applies the rule and says, oh, okay, we need this background image, we better download it. So there's going to be a delay if you do, so hero images, you actually almost want to get downloaded before the JavaScript and CSS, because it's so simple, it's an image, get it in front of the user as quick as possible. So you don't want to have to wait for CSS and DOM elements to be downloaded and created and applied in order just to kick off the image request. You want to get that image request kicked off as quickly as possible. And the best way to do that is to use the IMG tag. As far as base64 encoding images, you could do that if the images are very small. But for hero images, they're big. And so you wouldn't want a base64, a 200K image. It's going to be about 200K of characters. That will gzip down, but that's still going to bloat your HTML document a lot. And typically, HTML pages are not cacheable. So every time the user goes to that page, they're going to have to download that 200K, maybe compressed to 30 or 50K, every time. It'd be better to download a separate image, save it in the cache, and if the user revisits the page, they can just read that out of cache and get a small, pithy HTML document.
Hello. In the case of AngularJS, does it make sense to build a static page and with almost everything, and then put the Angular, the dynamic behavior after it? You think it can be done somehow, or it's too much?
So if I understand the question, it's kind of, and it's okay to, I have a whole talk that talks about how to kind of mess with the user's perception of the page. As long as they're happy, that's the main thing. They don't really care if you're showing them a static page and you swap it out as long as they don't notice. So I think that was the question about, should we consider creating a static page and then actually invoking, the MVC logic after that. And my guess is it's probably not, unless, you're not going to want to swap out the page that the user is looking at. If there's a way that static page is actually the entry point that you want them to start with, and then they could click on something, and then you would do a swap out to the SPA, for example, somehow. That might work. But we've tried, at companies I've been at, we've tried approaches like this. And there's usually this kind of flash swap experience that doesn't work that well. You could try it. I'm not optimistic. And yeah?
Hi. So speaking of silos and developers and designers working separately, one situation I've seen is designers come up with these beautiful designs, but then as developers, you're limited by the tool set that you're using, the frameworks you're using, and the customers love what the designer came up with, but you struggle to give a pixel-perfect representation of what the designer came up with. So I was wondering if you had any feedback on that, how to handle that type of issue.
Yeah, don't do mock-ups like that. Don't do static designer mock-ups. That was the whole thing about bringing the team together at the very beginning and not doing mock-ups, doing a prototype right away, because the mock-up's not going to work anyway if you have to target over 50 different screen sizes out there amongst your customers. They can't do a pixel-perfect mock-up across all those different screen sizes, especially as it's going to change as the customer changes their mind or adds something or takes something away. And so you work with the prototype right away. And then you're going to, if your framework is actually a constraint, you're going to bump into that earlier than later. You're going to say, wow, you know what? Are we all agreed that we want to get that kind of pixel-perfect everything that we want in the layout, and we're not able to do that with the framework we're using. We're going to have to switch frameworks. You do that earlier than later. Any other questions? Yeah.
First of all, great suggestions. And I recommend everybody read Ilya Grigorek, Critical Rendering Path from Google. Great recommendation, deep dive. Question regarding sites that are not publicly available, like enterprise applications. How do you suppose that you would analyze pages then, rather than just use a publicly available website? You need something that you can handle internally in your organization.
And Steve, if you could rephrase the question for the folks online, that'd be great.
Yeah. So the beginning part, that was the whole question. At the beginning part, there was just some shout outs to Ilya Grigorek, who's amazing. He was my office mate at Google for years. And he has a talk called Critical Path. I think it was also called Time to Glass in Under a Second or something like that. And that is a great talk. But the question was about, so Webpage Test is awesome. You go to webpagetest.org, you type in the URL. What if that URL is inside your corporate firewall? How is this public webpage test out in the world going to be able to fetch a URL that's inside the corporate firewall? It's not going to be able to do that. But there are about over 2,000 companies around the world. Webpage Test is all open source, so they've created private instances of Webpage Test inside their corporate firewall. At SpeedCurve, we also do this. You can set it up with, we can have certain cookies. We can have basic authentication that is scripted into the testing. And we can also do a thing where you don't have to run the entire Webpage Test instance inside the firewall. You just run the smaller repo, which is the test agents. And then all of the results are actually stored in SpeedCurve. And that's kind of nice because Webpage Test doesn't keep a history of all of your results, but SpeedCurve does. And we could be hitting the production site and the private internals like staging server, and you can see all of those results in a single dashboard.
So two related questions. What's your feeling on custom fonts, the use of custom fonts, and the use of icons in your custom fonts? Like if you want icons, do you usually are okay with custom fonts, or do you use like SVG or something else?
So this is where it's kind of good to have Mark and I working together. I mean, we really represent the two sides of this debate. And so I remember I was just joining, and we were doing a relaunch. I flew down there. That's when we took that picture. And so we're in his house in the jungle in New Zealand, and the internet connectivity is horrendous. And he's got this custom font in the speedcurve.com website. And I'm there for about 30 minutes, and we're starting to hack on the code together, do this relaunch in 3 days. And after 30 minutes, it's I can't stand this anymore. I mean, this thing is taking 7 seconds to render. What's going on? And I open up, speed curve, because we were using speed curve to analyze speed curve. And I see this custom font, and it's the Foundry is doing a redirect so it can do the DRM and charge us, which is fine. They deserve to do that. But the problem is the custom font was blocking all of the text on the page from rendering. And so, Mark is a designer. He loves that font. He said, well, we're not giving up the font. I love the font. And so we figured out a way to do the redirect separate from the actual font loading. And the redirect, the font was coming from our servers. And so the redirect was taking, in New Zealand, like 2 to 5 seconds easily. And so we, improved the, cut 3 or 4 seconds off of the rendering from his house. So yeah, that's the problem with custom fonts is they have different behavior on different browsers. They could block the entire page in some older browsers. At least, the concept is it's really, kind of ironic that we're using this custom font because it's giving us a very important aesthetic for some text on the page, but that text that is so important is now actually blocked from rendering longer than the crappy looking text, excuse my French. So like you've just kind of shot yourself in the foot. Like the most important font text that you want the user to see is delayed. And so there are ways you can work around that. In fact, just at Velocity last month, Zach Leatherman from the Filament Group did a talk, and so you can get his slides. He also wrote a blog post about, they've done a ton of research on how to load fonts asynchronously, and also how to get this trade-off of behavior. Am I willing, if it takes 20 seconds for the font to download, do I want the user to not see anything? Or probably not. Probably after a certain amount of time, I want a bail time. After 500 milliseconds, if the font's not downloaded, fall back to a system font, a default font. And they have, in their loading code, they have ways of doing that. And icon fonts, I don't use icon fonts that much. You would just have to be concerned that, same thing, the font could block those components from being downloaded. But if there's not like a DRM on the font, you could cache the font. And it would give you a lot of, they're easier to use than sprites, but a sprite might be another way to go about that. How much more time do we have, Kevin?
Whatever you think, Steve. So whenever you're done,
okay.
we'll go till then.
Yeah. Yes. Hi.
You talked about using the async tag on script and the CSS files, but turns out that the async tag is supported on IE 10. What would your recommendation be if we were to support older browsers?
Async in IE 10. I thought it was before that, but the best thing to do is to use async and defer. So IE actually was really early in supporting defer. The behavior was a little different in the early browsers, but defer is part of the HTML5 spec, and so it's supported by new browsers too, but async takes priority, so you can use both. And so in older browsers, now you get back to like IE6, I don't think supports either async or defer, but hopefully that's not one that you're looking at. So you can get, if it's, I didn't know async was IE 10 and later, but that's probably true. But you can use defer for 9 and 8. Anything else?
Any other questions from anyone?
I see one over there, and I think she had her hand up really early. And then maybe should we call it after that? Because I see some other
That
people
sounds
leaving.
great. So let's take this as
And
the last question.
this person was frowning like they were going to be held here forever. No, don't look behind you. I saw you, Skell. I'm joking. I'm joking. I wish I had a T-shirt to throw at you. To you, I mean.
Okay. Hi, I would like to ask you one question regarding the hero image. So, was there any study that showed that those hero images bring anything to the sites besides slowing the front page? Do you know? Because from a developer perspective, those hero images are really slowing every index page I was seeing. Was there any study that showed that they actually bring any value to the company or not?
A study that showed?
For the hero images, So if you have a hero image on the starting page, and those are usually big, high-resolution images that slow the whole site down, was there ever any study to show are they really necessary?
Oh, are they really necessary?
Yes,
I
do they bring
would guess. I would guess so. You know, perhaps not, but you know, it's not something that these sites had from the beginning. But I don't know. And even if they had done studies, they might not release those studies. But I don't know. I find those hero images pretty engaging. So I would guess they do have a positive impact. But I don't know about that. That would be great if, you know, maybe if anyone knows of studies like that, they could tweet them to the AngularU hashtag. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve.